The weeping sap. The sound I hate most in this world isn't the scream of a man in pain or the wail of a funeral procession. I've heard both and they chill the blood, of course they do. But the sound that truly hollows me out, that turns my stomach into a knot of ice, is the whine of a two-stroke engine. The eager, high-pitched scream of a chainsaw biting into wood. To most people, it's the sound of progress, of a job getting done. To me, it is the sound of a hungry ghost. Before I learned to hate that sound, I was just another young man in Phnom Penh trying to swim against the current. The city breathes a thick, heavy air, a mix of diesel fumes from a million motos, the sweet rot of mangoes piled high on a street vendor's cart, and the dust of endless construction. I lived in a small apartment with my mother, where the sound of the city never truly faded, just softened to a dull roar at night. My mother's breath was shallow, her cough a constant, soft percussion against the rhythm of our lives. The doctors used long, complicated words, but they all translated to the same simple, brutal fact: we needed money. More money than I could ever make driving a tuk-tuk or working in a garment factory. That's when I heard about the logging crews heading into the cardamoms. The pay was good, dangerously good. The kind of money that makes a desperate man ignore the warnings in his own gut. My mother pleaded with me not to go. She spoke of the Nikta, the guardian spirits of the forests and mountains, and how they don't take kindly to men who come with fire and steel. I just smiled, kissed her on the forehead, and told her I would be careful. I was a city boy. I believed in traffic laws and electricity bills, not ancient spirits in the trees. I thought the most dangerous thing in the jungle would be a snake or a hidden patch of malaria. I was so very, very wrong. The journey itself felt like traveling backward in time. The bus, crammed with people and chickens and bags of rice, rattled out of the capital's sprawling chaos. The concrete and steel slowly gave way to dusty towns, then to smaller villages of stilted wooden houses. Finally, at a sun-baked crossroads in Pursat province, a battered pickup truck was waiting. That's where I met Vanna. He was my partner on the saw. He was maybe 10 years older than me, his skin the color of rich earth, his arms corded with muscle from a lifetime of hard labor. He didn't say much. He just nodded when I introduced myself, his eyes scanning me with a quiet, unreadable intensity. He was from a small village near the forest's edge. He didn't just work in the jungle, he seemed to be a part of it. The truck ride was the last step. The paved road disappeared, turning into a red dirt track that clawed its way into the mountains. The air grew thick, wet, and heavy. It felt like breathing water. The roar of the city was replaced by a new sound, a deafening, multi-layered chorus of insects, birds, and things I couldn't name. It was a living wall of sound. The green of the jungle wasn't just a color, it was a presence. It closed in on the truck, the leaves of great trees brushing against the windows like curious fingers. I felt a prickle of unease, the kind a stray dog feels when it wanders into a tiger's territory. I was an intruder here. Everything about this place, the smells, the sounds, the sheer oppressive life of it was letting me know it. Vanna must have seen the look on my face. He finally spoke, his voice low, almost a whisper against the jungle's noise. The forest has its own heart, Bong Paisith. It is good to remember to walk softly. Bong, brother, it was a simple, respectful word, but the way he said it, it felt more like a warning. I didn't know then that he wasn't just talking about snakes and broken ground. He was talking about a heart that we were about to cut into. The logging camp was a raw, ugly scar carved into the green. A collection of makeshift tin-roofed huts, a cook tent spewing greasy smoke, and the constant smell of diesel and stale sweat. Our foreman, a heavy-set man named Mr. Lim, cared about one thing: cubic meters of timber. He pointed at maps, shouted orders, and ignored the low murmurs of the older workers, men like Vanna, who spoke of auspicious days and offerings to the local spirits. For the first 2 weeks, the work was brutal but straightforward. We rose before the sun, the air still cool and misty. The saws would scream to life, and we would spend the day felling trees, the world a blur of sawdust, sweat, and the shuddering crash of timber. At night, we'd eat rice and dried fish around a fire, our bodies aching, our ears still ringing with the ghost sound of the engines. During those first weeks, I felt strong. I was earning my money. My mother's face was a constant image in my mind, pushing me forward. I ignored the jungle. I treated it like a factory floor, a resource to be harvested. Then Mr. Lim pointed to a new section on his map, a place the local guides had advised him to avoid. At its heart, marked with a thick X, was our next target. It wasn't just a tree. We reached it in the late morning after cutting a path through thick undergrowth. We stepped into a small, natural clearing, and every man fell silent. Even the foreman, Mr. Lim, seemed to hold his breath. In the center of the clearing stood a banyan tree, Deem Cray, as Vanna whispered beside me. But that name felt too small for it. It was a cathedral. Its trunk was a gnarled, colossal pillar so wide that 10 of us couldn't have circled it with outstretched arms. But the trunk was only the beginning. From its massive branches, hundreds of aerial roots descended, plunging back into the earth to become new trunks, creating a living temple of interconnected pillars. The canopy was a world of its own, a vast, dark green continent that blotted out the sun, plunging the clearing into a permanent, sacred twilight. The air here was different, cooler and filled with a strange, sweet scent like frangipani blossoms and old incense. At the base of the main trunk, nestled amongst the labyrinth of roots, was a small, crude shrine. Faded scraps of saffron cloth were tied to the roots. There were melted stubs of candles, a small bowl containing a few grains of dried rice, and the blackened remains of incense sticks. Someone sometime had worshipped this place. "We cannot cut this one," Vanna said, his voice firm. He wasn't speaking to me but to Mr. Lim. The foreman scoffed, though his eyes kept darting nervously towards the tree. "Don't be a village fool, Vanna. This is prime timber, grade A hardwood. It's worth more than your entire village." "This is a Nik Ta Deem Cray," Vanna insisted, his voice dropping lower. "A great spirit lives here. To cut it is to invite a curse upon us all. My grandfather told me stories. The spirit of such a tree protects the forest, the animals, the people who show it respect. To harm it," he trailed off, shaking his head. Mr. Lim spat on the ground. "The only spirit I believe in is the one that signs my paychecks. I'm doubling the bonus for the team that brings this tree down. You have 2 days." He turned and marched away, leaving the rest of us standing in the deep, quiet shadow of the banyan. No one wanted to be the first to start their saw. I looked at the tree, at its immense, ancient presence. For the first time, my city-bred skepticism wavered. The place felt watchful, it felt alive. A part of me, the part that remembered my mother's frightened stories, screamed at me to walk away. But the other part, the part that saw her tired face and heard her wheezing cough, saw only the money. The bonus Mr. Lim offered was enough for her medicine for 6 months. That night, the camp was quiet. The usual gambling and loud talk were replaced by hushed conversations. I saw Vanna at the edge of the clearing, facing the direction of the banyan tree. He lit 3 sticks of incense, holding them between his pressed palms as he bowed his head, his lips moving in a silent prayer of apology. The next morning, the air was thick with dread. It took 2 teams, 4 chainsaws to even begin the work. I was on one of them with Vanna. He worked in a grim, silent fury, his face a mask of stone. He wouldn't look at me. He wouldn't look at the tree. He just guided the saw, his movements precise and mechanical. The sound was obscene. The scream of our engines in that quiet, sacred place felt like a blasphemy. The saw teeth bit into the ancient bark, and a dark, thick sap began to ooze from the cut. It was a deep, startling red, almost the color of blood. It dripped down the trunk in slow, weeping trails. The sweet smell of frangipani intensified, mingling with the acrid stench of gasoline and hot metal. It took the entire day. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, when the great tree finally gave a groan that seemed to shake the very ground. It was a sound of deep, mortal agony. It tilted slowly at first, then with a terrifying, rushing momentum. Branches the size of smaller trees snapped and tore through the canopy. The crash was apocalyptic. A tremor ran through the earth, and a great wind blasted out from the impact, carrying with it a cloud of dust and leaves. And then silence. A profound, unnatural silence. The ever-present chorus of the jungle had ceased. No birds, no insects, nothing. It felt as though the entire forest was holding its breath, staring in horror at the corpse we had just created. We stood there, sweating, covered in sawdust, our ears ringing in the void. In the center of the clearing where the cathedral had stood, there was now just a wound. A massive, pale stump weeping its red sap into the twilight. We walked back to the camp without a word. No one celebrated the bonus. That night, the jungle remained silent. It was more frightening than the noise had ever been. The strange things started the very next day. Small things at first. A logger would put his axe down for a moment, turn his back, and it would be gone. Not stolen, just gone. Another man swore his canteen, full of water, was suddenly full of thick, red sap that smelled sickly sweet. Mr. Lim laughed it off as carelessness and jungle fever. But the atmosphere in the camp had changed. The air felt heavy, charged with a quiet menace. Men started sleeping with their machetes beside them. Fights broke out over nothing. A strange sickness began to spread. It wasn't malaria. The men would get a fever, their eyes would glaze over, and they would mutter in their sleep. They spoke of roots growing through their beds, of a high-pitched whining sound that no one else could hear. Vanna grew more and more withdrawn. I saw him carving small, crude figures from scraps of wood. He would leave them at the edge of the camp with a pinch of rice, little offerings to an anger he knew was gathering. He told me the spirit of the tree was now a ghost, an Aran, lost and furious. It had no home, so it would haunt the place of its death. One evening, I was walking back from the river and a strange scent caught my attention. The cloying, sweet smell of frangipani blossoms. It was so strong it made me gag, but there were no frangipani trees for miles. I followed the scent, my curiosity overriding my fear. It led me to the great stump. In the fatting light, I saw something that made my heart stop. The entire surface of the stump was wet. It wasn't just weeping sap from the edges anymore. The dark red liquid was beating up all over its pale, flat surface like sweat on a feverish brow. And from the dozens of smaller stumps around it, the severed roots that had once been trunks, the same red sap was oozing, pooling on the forest floor in dark, sticky puddles. The clearing looked like it was bleeding. I backed away slowly, my skin crawling. I didn't tell anyone what I'd seen. Who would believe me? They would say it was just sap. But I knew what I saw, I knew what I smelled. It was the smell of a funeral. A week after we cut down the banyan, it happened. The night that burned itself into my memory, the night that I still see every time I close my eyes. The humidity was a physical weight pressing down on us. The camp was lit by a single bare bulb powered by our old sputtering generator. The light was a sickly yellow, painting everything in jaundiced, flickering shades. It steamed in the damp air, attracting a frantic cloud of moths. Most of the men were already in their huts trying to escape the oppressive heat. Only Vanna and I were still outside, cleaning the chainsaws by the generator's weak glow. The generator coughed once, twice. The light flickered violently, casting our shadows into a spastic dance. Then, with a final wheezing sigh, it died. We were plunged into absolute darkness, save for the faint, silvery light of a half-moon filtered through the canopy. But it was the sound, or rather the lack of it, that struck me first. The deafening, ever-present chorus of cicadas, the sonic fabric of the jungle night, fell silent. Not faded, not quieted, it stopped all at once. As if a switch had been thrown, the void it left was so absolute it felt like a pressure against my eardrums. A physical, crushing silence that was 1,000 times more terrifying than the noise it had replaced. Every nerve in my body screamed, this was wrong. This was the silence of a predator about to strike. My hand tightened on the cold metal of the chainsaw I was holding. My knuckles were white. I could hear my own heart hammering against my ribs, a frantic drum in the dead quiet. And then, from the impenetrable darkness in the direction of the clearing, where the great banyan tree once stood, a new sound began. It was a soft weeping. But it was a sound of pure horror. It was not the sound of a woman or a child or any living creature. It was a chilling, perfect mimicry of the high-pitched whine of our own chainsaws. Not the roaring, cutting sound, but the sound the engine makes when it's idling, that thin, keening wail. But it was distorted, stretched into a long, mournful, sobbing cry. It rose and fell in the cadence of a person consumed by grief, a mechanical lament that scraped at the inside of my skull. Way, 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 the sound echoed through the silent trees. I froze, unable to move, unable to breathe. A smell flooded my senses, overwhelming and immediate. The sharp chemical tang of spilled diesel from our work, and under it, thick and suffocating, the cloying, sweet perfume of frangipani blossoms. The smell of our sin and the smell of death all at once. It filled my throat and I thought I was going to be sick. I wanted to look at Vanna, to see the terror I felt reflected in his eyes, to find some shred of shared sanity in this nightmare. But he didn't look at me. His head was turned towards the tree line, his eyes wide and fixed on the darkness. His face, illuminated by the faint moonlight, was a mask of awe and terror. His lips were moving, forming silent words, a prayer or a plea. He wasn't looking at the darkness. I followed his gaze and my blood ran cold. He was looking at the freshly cut stumps near our camp, the smaller trees we had cleared to make a path. In the flickering, unreliable moonlight, they seemed to weep. The sap, dark and thick, oozed from their wounds, glistening like tears. And Vanna was speaking to them as if they were the grieving children of the giant we had murdered. The mechanical weeping grew louder, closer. It was joined by another sound, a rhythmic, dragging scrape, the sound of something heavy being pulled through the undergrowth. Scrape, sob, sob. Vanna, I whispered, my voice a dry crackle. Bung, Vanna, what is that? He didn't answer, he just kept staring, his silent mouthing growing more frantic. He took a single, shuffling step towards the darkness. No, I hissed, grabbing his arm. His skin was cold as stone. He felt rigid like a statue. Vanna, snap out of it. He slowly turned his head to look at me, but his eyes were not his own. They were vacant, glossy, like the eyes of a dead fish. And when he spoke, the voice was not his. It was a low, guttural rasp, a sound that seemed to come from deep within the earth itself. It was layered, like many voices speaking at once. You smell of my blood. The scraping sound was right at the edge of the camp now. The chainsaw weeping was all around us, a chorus of mechanical grief that seemed to come from every direction at once. I risked a glance into the darkness. I couldn't see anything clearly, just a shifting of the shadows, a distortion in the air. But I saw a shape, tall, impossibly thin, cobbled together from what looked like broken branches and twisted roots. It moved with a lurching, uneven gait, and as it shifted, the moonlight glinted off something it was dragging. It was the axe that had gone missing on the first day. My survival instinct, buried under a mountain of terror, finally kicked in. I let go of Vanna and stumbled backward, tripping over a fuel can. I scrambled away on my hands and knees, my mind screaming a single word: run. Piseth, a voice called from behind me. It was Vanna's voice, his normal voice full of fear. Bong, help me. I turned back. He was standing in the same spot, his arms outstretched towards me. The thing in the darkness had stopped. The weeping sound had quieted to a low hum. Relief washed over me. He had snapped out of it. Vanna, come on, I yelled, getting to my feet. He took a step towards me, his face twisted in a desperate plea. My legs, I can't move them, Aun, please. Aun, little brother. I took a step towards him, my hand outstretched, and then I saw it, his shadow. In the moonlight, his shadow on the ground was not his own. It was long, impossibly long, and it stretched back into the darkness where it merged with the tall, thin shape lurking at the tree line. He wasn't standing, he was being held. The weeping sound started again, but this time it came from Vanna's own throat. A perfect, metallic, two-stroke whine issued from his open mouth as his head was pulled back at an unnatural angle. He didn't scream, he just wept the sound of the machine that had killed his god. I didn't wait to see more. I turned and ran. I ran blindly, crashing through the jungle, branches whipping at my face, thorns tearing at my clothes and skin. I didn't know where I was going. I just ran away from the sound. Behind me, I heard a final, deafening crash, the sound of a tin hut being torn apart, followed by the screams of the other men waking up to the nightmare. I don't know how long I ran, hours, maybe a whole night. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs gave out, and I collapsed at the edge of a dirt road as the first light of dawn broke through the trees. A farmer found me, delirious and babbling about weeping trees. He took me to his village. They gave me water and food and listened to my fragmented story with wide, knowing eyes. No one was surprised. They told me the logging company had fled, leaving everything behind. They said 3 men were missing, including the foreman, Mr. Lim, and my partner, Vanna. They were never found. The authorities said it was a wild animal attack. A tiger, maybe. But the villagers knew. They knew the price for waking a Neek Ta. I made it back to Phnom Penh. I gave the money, my blood money, to my mother. It was enough. Her health improved. I tried to go back to my old life, to the noise and the traffic and the comforting logic of the city. But I am not the same. I am a haunted man. Sometimes, late at night, when the city finally quiets down, I hear it, a faint, high-pitched whine on the edge of hearing. I tell myself it's just a distant moto or the air conditioner in the next building, but I know what it is. And the smell? Every now and then, a breeze will drift through my open window, even here in the heart of the city, miles from any jungle. And it will carry a scent, not diesel, not rotting fruit, a sweet, cloying, floral scent that makes the hair on my arms stand up. The smell of frangipani, the smell of the grave we dug. I escaped the jungle, but the jungle never truly let me go. A part of me is still back there in that dark, silent clearing, listening to the weeping of the saws. Vanna's voice was the last thing I heard. He called me Aun, little brother. I left my brother behind. This is my karma. This is the price I pay. So if you ever find yourself in the deep, quiet places of the world and you see an ancient tree that seems to command respect, I beg of you, listen to that feeling. Leave an offering, say a prayer, or just walk away. Do not be blinded by greed. Do not think that your machines make you strong. Because there are hearts that beat in the wood, and when you break them, they do not forget. And their ghosts learn to weep in the language of your own sins. The Weeping Banyan. The first thing you forget when you spend enough time in the deep jungle is what true silence sounds like. The forest is never quiet. It's a living, breathing thing, a constant symphony of a million tiny lives. The drone of cicadas is the bass line, the rustle of leaves is the percussion, the calls of unseen birds are the melody. You get used to it. It becomes the sound of safety, the sound of normalcy. Which is why, when it all stops, the silence is the loudest thing you've ever heard. The generator's cough died an hour ago. It had sputtered for a good 10 minutes, a mechanical death rattle that we were too tired to pay much attention to. We were loggers, or rather, they were loggers. I was just the site supervisor from Phnom Penh, the city boy with a clipboard and a degree in forestry, sent to make sure the quotas were met. My job was to count the fallen giants. When the engine finally gave up, it left a vacuum. The oppressive weight of the Cardamom Mountains' humidity seemed to crash down on our small, profane clearing. The air, thick and wet, stuck to my skin like a shroud. The lingering stench of diesel fuel was the only reminder of our modern intrusion. And then I noticed it. The cicadas were gone. The entire jungle orchestra had packed up and left. There was no wind, no rustle, no distant cry, just a profound, unnerving stillness that clung to the air like damp silk. It felt expectant, like the whole world was holding its breath, waiting for something terrible to happen. Bong Tom, our crew chief, a man whose skin was the color and texture of old leather, spat a stream of red beetle juice onto the dark earth. He didn't look at me. His eyes were fixed on the wall of black that surrounded our camp, a solid mass of trees that seemed to lean in, listening. "The land is not happy," he grunted, his voice a low rumble. I wanted to laugh it off, to make a joke about him being superstitious, to blame the dead generator, but the words caught in my throat. The fear was a physical thing, a cold knot tightening in my stomach. My flashlight beam, powered by fresh batteries, felt pitifully weak against the consuming darkness. It trembled in my hand as I swept it across the clearing, past the silent bulldozer, past the stacked logs that looked like the bones of colossal beasts. My light came to rest on the reason we were here. The prize, a banyan tree, or what was left of it. It had been ancient, a monarch of this forest for centuries. Its trunk was so wide it had taken 3 men with linked arms to barely circle it. Now it was just a massive, weeping stump, a pale, raw wound in the heart of the jungle. Clear sap, like tears, oozed from the fresh-cut wood, glistening in my beam. That's when the smell hit me. It drifted from the dark wall of trees, cutting through the diesel fumes, a sweet, cloying scent, jasmine incense. The kind my own grandmother leaves at the spirit house in her garden, the kind left as an offering for the Nikta, the spirits of the land. It was a sacred smell in a desecrated place, and the combination made my blood run cold. My light stayed fixed on the stump. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. Bong Tom made a soft, choking sound beside me. I followed his terrified gaze back to the pale, weeping wood. Something was happening. Across the raw, white surface of the stump, a mark was slowly appearing. It wasn't a stain seeping up from the wood. It was materializing as if being pressed from the other side of reality. It was dark and wet and impossibly small. A tiny child-sized handprint. For a long moment, nobody moved. The 3 of us, me, Bong Tom, and Vuthi, the youngest and loudest of the crew, were frozen statues in the humid dark. The silence was so complete I could hear the blood roaring in my ears. The handprint on the stump seemed to pulse in my wavering flashlight beam, a dark accusation. It was perfect, every line of the tiny palm, every delicate finger, etched in a moisture that was darker than the tree's own sap. Vuthi was the first to break the spell. He let out a shaky, nervous laugh that sounded horribly out of place. "What is that? Some kind of sap pattern?" he stammered, trying to sound brave, but his voice cracked on the last word. Bong Tom didn't answer. He took a slow, deliberate step backwards, his hand instinctively going to the small, worn amulet he wore around his neck. His face, usually a mask of calm authority, was pale with a deep, primal fear I had never seen in an adult man before. "We should not have cut it," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "This was a mother tree, a spirit house." I was the man of science, the one with the degree. I was supposed to be rational. My mind raced, searching for an explanation. An animal. No, the print was undeniably human. A trick of the light. A chemical reaction in the sap. Every logical reason I came up with felt thin and pathetic, a child's lie against an ancient, terrible truth. The smell of jasmine incense was getting stronger, so thick I could almost taste it. It felt like it was coiling around my throat. "We need to leave," Bong Tom said, his voice firm now, cutting through my chaotic thoughts. "Not in the morning now. We take the truck and we go." "And what about the quota, Bong Tom?" Vuthi snapped, his fear turning to bravado. "You want to explain to the company that we abandoned a whole site because of a smudge on a tree? They'll laugh us all the way back to Kampong Spew. It's nothing. A prank maybe, someone from the village trying to scare us off." "There is no village for 50 kilometers, I said, my own voice barely a whisper. I couldn't take my eyes off the handprint. It looked so fresh, so present, as if the child who made it had just lifted their hand away a second ago. "We must make an offering," Bong Tom insisted, ignoring Vuthi. He started rummaging through his bag, his hands shaking. "We must ask for forgiveness. Rithi, you must tell them we cannot stay here." I was torn. My entire career, my salary that supported my parents in Phnom Penh, it all depended on this job. Abandoning the site would be professional suicide. But looking at that handprint, feeling that oppressive, watchful silence, I knew Bong Tom was right. We had trespassed. We had broken a rule far older than any company policy. "Okay," I said, my voice gaining a little strength. "Okay, Bong Tom, in the morning, we'll pack up and leave first thing in the morning. It's too dangerous to drive the track at night." It was a compromise, a fool's bargain. I told myself it was the logical choice, but deep down I knew the real reason. I was too terrified to move. We all were. The idea of turning our backs on that stump, of walking through the darkness to the truck, felt impossible. It felt like turning your back on a predator. That night no one slept. We huddled in the main tent, the small gas lantern casting long, dancing shadows that played tricks on our eyes. Every creak of the canvas, every rustle from outside made us jump. The air remained dead still, the silence unbroken. We didn't talk. We just sat listening to the quiet, each of us lost in our own fearful thoughts. I kept seeing the handprint in my mind. The size of it. It couldn't have belonged to a child more than 4 or 5 years old. What would a child be doing this deep in the jungle? The question was wrong, and I knew it. The real question was, what kind of child leaves a handprint from the inside of a tree? Sometime after midnight, a new sound began. It was faint at first, so faint I thought I was imagining it. A soft, rhythmic sound, a gentle scraping. Scrape, pause, scrape. It was coming from the direction of the stump. Vuthi, who had been trying to pretend he was asleep, sat bolt upright. "Did you hear that?" Bong Tom and I both nodded, our eyes wide in the lantern light. The scraping continued, slow and steady. It sounded like fingernails dragging across wood, tiny fingernails. "I'm going to see what it is," Vuthi said, grabbing a large machete. His face was a mask of defiance, but his knuckles were white where he gripped the handle. "No," Bong Tom hissed, grabbing his arm. "Aun, do not be a fool, you must not go out there. Whatever is making that sound, it is not for us to see." "I'm not a child to be scared of ghost stories, Bong Tom," Vuthi shot back, shaking him off. "It's probably just a porcupine or something. I'm going to scare it off." He unzipped the tent flap and stepped out into the suffocating darkness before I could stop him. I grabbed my flashlight and scrambled after him, Bong Tom muttering desperate prayers behind me. My beam cut through the night, finding Vuthi standing a few meters from the tent, staring towards the stump. The scraping sound had stopped the moment he stepped outside. The clearing was silent again. The smell of jasmine was gone, replaced once more by the scent of diesel and damp earth. "See," Vuthi said, his voice a little too loud. "Nothing, just the jungle playing tricks." He took a few confident steps towards the stump, swinging his machete lightly. My light followed him, painting him and the giant stump in a circle of white. He reached the edge of the felled tree and peered at the surface. "There's nothing here," he called back. "The handprint is even gone." I swept my own light over the vast, pale expanse of wood. He was right. The dark, wet handprint had vanished completely. There was no trace of it. A wave of relief washed over me, so powerful it made me dizzy. Maybe it had just been sap. Maybe we had all worked ourselves into a panic over nothing. And then Vuthi screamed. It was not a yell of fright. It was a sharp, piercing shriek of pure agony. He stumbled backwards, dropping the machete with a clang. He was clutching his hand, his eyes wide with shock and pain. I ran to him, my light bobbing frantically. "Vuthi, what is it? What happened?" He held up his hand and I felt my stomach lurch. Embedded deep in the fleshy part of his palm, so deep that the skin had closed around them, were 5 long, needle-thin splinters of banyan wood. They were arranged in an unmistakable pattern, the size and shape of a small child's fingers, gripping him from within. We spent the rest of the night in a state of barely controlled panic. Bong Tom, his face grim, used pliers from the toolkit to pull the splinters from Vuthi's hand. Each one came out with a sickening tear of flesh, dark blood welling up immediately. Vuthi didn't scream again. He just sat there shaking, his eyes darting around the tent as if expecting an attack at any moment. The splinters were unnaturally long and sharp, more like thorns than wood fragments. When Bong Tom laid them on a cloth, they looked like the skeletal fingers of a tiny hand. By the time the weak gray light of dawn filtered through the jungle canopy, we had made our decision. We were leaving. Quota be damned. I would call the main office from the first town with a signal and invent a story, a broken axle, a fuel line leak, anything. The jungle seemed different in the daylight. The silence had been replaced by a low, mournful hum of insects. It didn't sound normal, it sounded like a dirge. As we frantically packed our personal belongings, I kept glancing over at the banyan stump. It looked inert, just a massive block of wood. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching us, that the entire forest was watching us. Vuthi's hand was bandaged with a dirty rag. He was quiet, sullen, his earlier bravado completely gone. He refused to look at anyone, just packed his bag with jerky, angry movements. "The offering," Bong Tom said suddenly. He had a small clay pot, a few sticks of incense, and a half-eaten mango from his lunch. "We must give something to show respect, to ask for safe passage." He walked cautiously towards the stump, his steps slow and deliberate, like a man approaching a sleeping tiger. He placed the mango in the center of the stump, lit the incense sticks, and stuck them into the soft fruit. He bowed his head, murmuring a quiet prayer in Khmer that I couldn't quite hear. The sweet, cloying smell of jasmine once again filled the air, this time from a source we could see, but it brought no comfort. We loaded the last of our gear into the back of the old pickup truck. The engine, thank the heavens, turned over on the second try, its familiar roar a welcome shield against the sorrowful hum of the forest. I got in the driver's seat with Bong Tom beside me and Vuthi squeezed in the middle. No one said a word as I put the truck in gear and began to navigate the muddy, rutted track that led away from the clearing. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I was too afraid of what I might see. The drive was tense. The track was narrow and treacherous, and the jungle pressed in on both sides, its dense foliage sometimes scraping against the doors. Every shadow seemed to hold a flicker of movement. Every vine looked like a grasping arm. About an hour into the drive, Vuthi spoke for the first time. His voice was a dry croak. "It's hot," he said. "Can we open a window?" I glanced at him. His face was pale and beaded with sweat, despite the morning being relatively cool. Bong Tom felt his forehead. "You have a fever," he said, his voice tight with concern. "A bad one, Rithi. We need to get him to a clinic." "We will," I promised, pressing a little harder on the accelerator. The district town is another 2 hours away. Vuthi leaned his head back against the seat, his eyes closing. "My hand, it's burning." Over the next hour, he got worse. The fever spiked. He began to shiver violently, his teeth chattering. He started talking, but his words made no sense. He was delirious, muttering about a little girl in a white dress, about the taste of sap, about a game of hide-and-seek among the roots of a giant tree. "She just wants to play," he mumbled, a strange, childlike smile on his face. "She says I have to hide inside the tree, it's safe in there." Bong Tom was trying to give him water, but Vuthi just pushed the bottle away. A dark, ugly-looking infection was spreading from the wounds on his palm, red streaks running up his arm like veins on a leaf. Then he started coughing. It was a deep, wet, racking cough that shook his whole body. He coughed so hard he couldn't breathe, his face turning a purplish shade. Bong Tom was slapping his back, yelling his name. I floored the accelerator, the truck bucking and sliding on the muddy track. We had to get him help. Vuthi's coughing fit ended with a final, horrible gurgle. He spat something into his hand. He stared at it, his fever-bright eyes wide with a confusion that slowly curdled into pure terror. From between his lips, he had coughed up a single, perfect, green banyan leaf. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. A thin trickle of clear, sticky sap oozed from the corner of his mouth. "Rithi," he whispered, "it's growing." And then his eyes rolled back in his head, and he began to convulse. There was nothing we could do. We were in the middle of nowhere, miles from any help. I pulled the truck over, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the wheel. Bong Tom held Vuthi, trying to keep him from injuring himself, but the seizure was too violent. It was over in less than a minute. Vuthi's body went limp, his head slumped against the dusty dashboard. He was gone. Bong Tom and I sat there in the cab of the truck, the sound of my own ragged breathing filling the sudden silence. The jungle outside seemed to press in, watching, waiting. Bong Tom gently closed Vuthi's eyes. As he did, he let out a sharp, horrified gasp. I leaned over, dreading what I would see. A small, tender green shoot, no bigger than my thumb, was pushing its way out of the corner of Vuthi's open mouth. A tiny, new banyan sapling, its leaves unfurling in the dim light of the cab. We didn't know what to do. We couldn't take him to the authorities. What would we say? How could we explain what had happened? In the end, we made a terrible choice born of fear and self-preservation. We found a place deep in the forest, far from the track. We wrapped Vuthi's body in a canvas tarp from the truck. As we lifted him, I saw with sickening horror that his skin had taken on a strange, pale, wood-like texture, and the red streaks on his arm had darkened, looking like the grain of timber beneath his skin. We buried him. We dug a shallow grave with our hands and a small shovel from the truck. We worked in a grim silence, the only sound the scraping of earth and the mournful hum of the forest. We said no prayers. We were too afraid. We just wanted to be gone. When we were finished, Bong Tom took the amulet from his neck and placed it on the freshly turned earth. "Forgive us," he whispered to the silent trees. Then we got back in the truck and drove, and we did not stop until we saw the paved roads and concrete buildings of civilization. We told the company that Vuthi had run off, that he had taken his pay and disappeared into a town on the way back, probably to gamble it away. It was a weak story, but the company didn't ask too many questions. A missing logger was just a line in a ledger. They closed the site, citing equipment failure and logistical problems. The weeping Banyan was left in peace. I quit my job. I couldn't do it anymore. I moved back to my parents' small apartment in Phnom Penh, hoping the noise and chaos of the city would drown out the memory of the jungle's silence. For a while, it worked. Life fell into a new routine. The city was loud and dirty and blessedly free of ancient trees. I tried to forget Bong Tom's haunted face. I tried to forget the feeling of Vuthi's body, strangely stiff and light as we carried him to his hidden grave. I tried to forget the sight of that small green sapling. But some things once seen can never be unseen. The nightmares were the first sign. I would dream I was back in the clearing. The air would be silent and thick with the smell of jasmine. I would walk to the stump and the small handprint would be there. But in the dream, I would place my own hand over it. I would feel a sudden, sharp pain, and when I pulled my hand away, tiny green shoots would be sprouting from my fingertips. I would wake up screaming, drenched in sweat, clawing at my own hands. Then other things started happening. I would be walking down a crowded street and suddenly catch a whiff of jasmine incense, even when there was no shrine nearby. I started noticing banyan trees everywhere in the city, small, potted ones on balconies, larger ones shading the grounds of pagodas. They seemed to be watching me. Their leaves seemed to whisper my name when the wind blew. One evening, during the rainy season, I was sitting in my room, watching the monsoon rain lash against the window pane. The glass was fogged with condensation. I was tracing idle patterns on it with my finger when I saw it. On a clear patch of the glass, a small circle had appeared in the fog. It was a handprint, a tiny, child-sized handprint. It was on the inside of the window in my room. My blood turned to ice. I backed away from the window, my heart hammering against my ribs. I stared at the print, perfect and clear, until my own breath fogged the glass again and it vanished. It has been a month since then. I see the handprint often now, on my bathroom mirror after a hot shower, in the dust on a tabletop, on the back of a bus window as it pulls away from the curb. It's always there just for a moment, a small, silent reminder, a promise. I don't know what it is, a spirit, a curse, a memory that has taken root in my soul. I don't think it's the ghost of a child. I think it is the tree itself, the ancient life force we wounded, and it has splintered like the thorns in Vuthi's hand. A part of it is now inside of me, waiting, growing. Sometimes when I cough, I taste sap. So I am telling you this story as a warning. There are places in this world, in my country, that are older and more powerful than any corporation, than any machine, than any man. They are the homes of spirits, but they are also spirits themselves. You can cut them down, you can haul them away in pieces, but you can never truly kill them. Because some things don't die, they just find a new place to grow, and if you are not careful, that place might be you. Be careful what you take from the forest. You might just bring a part of it back home, a part that will never ever let you go.